So have you ever been flying along and wondered or worried about your propeller just falling off the airplane, or worse, cracking and becoming very out of balance? I know that's actually one of my biggest fears in an airplane, is losing a chunk of the propeller and having the airplane become so unbalanced that the engine tears from the airplane and the airplane's wildly out of balance. Now, that's pretty unlikely, but I certainly check the leading edge of my prop every time looking for nicks, cuts, and little dings in it. And in this case, this airplane actually did lose a chunk of the propeller. Luckily, it turned out all right. But cruising along at 4,500 feet in a pretty uneventful flight, operating somewhere between 2,350 and 2,400 RPM, just above the prohibited range on the RPM of 2,100 to 2,350, the pilot experienced severe vibration in the airplane, immediately switched fuel tanks, turned on the fuel pump, tried to troubleshoot the issue, tried to get the vibration to smooth out, but couldn't get the vibration to stop, didn't notice any abnormal indications on the engine instruments. So he squawked 7700 and proceeded to the nearest airport and landed immediately. Now, upon landing, it became very clear to him what had happened. It wasn't in fact an engine problem. This case was actually a propeller problem. Now, the airplane you fly may not mention anything like this, but some airplanes have placards, or worse, have a prohibition on a certain RPM range, but are missing a placard to let you know not to operate within that range. It should be placarded right there on the instrument panel, letting the pilot know not to keep the engine running in a particular RPM range for too long, because certain engine-propeller combinations create harmonic vibrations that will, over time, cause fatigue cracks in the propeller. That's common, actually. That's an accepted risk in general aviation. We simply put a little note on the dashboard, a little note on the instrument panel. We don't operate within those ranges. For this airplane, it was 2,100 to 2,350. And the pilot thought he was operating between 2,350 and 2,400, above that. However, how this ended up happening is, in fact, the tachometer was indicating 50 RPM higher than the engine was actually running. So he was actually operating within that prohibited range, and not just for one flight, but this had been happening for many, many hours. This had been going on for a long time, because as we look at the propeller fracture here, as we look at this propeller blade, we can see the shiny part. That's a fatigue crack that occurred over a long period of time. The back, dull gray part is just a simple failure of the metal, as that fatigue crack let go and the metal failed instantaneously on the back 30%. But 70% of the prop had a fatigue crack in it that wouldn't necessarily be evident simply inspecting the leading edge of the propeller on your pre-flight. Now, this is so common, in fact, the FAA actually has a notice out on it that tells you, hey, make sure that you're following those placards on your instrument panels, and double check and make sure that your airplane doesn't need a placard prohibiting a certain RPM range, yet it's not installed. And it's not just the airplane, it may be the particular propeller you put on. So maybe you have a 172 that doesn't have a prohibited range, and then you swap propellers to a cruise prop, and all of a sudden you do have a prohibited range. You need to install the placard as well. Now, this incident turned out very well, and the pilot was able to get the airplane on the ground safely, but certainly this could have been a lot worse. With an out-of-balance propeller like that, shaking the airplane, it could cause a lot of other things to go wrong, possibly rip the engine off the airplane and create a super out-of-balance state, or worse, having chunks of the propeller fly off and hit part of the wing or the control surfaces of the aircraft. Luckily, this one turned out pretty uneventfully. So if you're curious at all about the airplane you're flying and the propeller that's installed on there, go ahead and look up the type certificate data sheet. We show you how to do that in our online courses at flyatmikealpha.com. Check out the type certificate data sheet, see what kind of propeller it's supposed to have on it, look in your logbooks of the aircraft, find out what propeller is actually installed, and then go ahead to the FAA website and search the AD list and find out if there's any ADs that apply to that propeller, or if there's any placards that need to be installed for it. You can find out how to do this all online at the online courses at flyatmikealpha.com and our private pilot, instrument pilot, and commercial pilot ground schools. Check out a lot of the other awesome free online courses like spin prevention training, crosswind landings, all free, all online at flyatmikealpha.com. You can create a free account today. And as always, guys, if you can't fly every day, then fly at mikealpha.com. We'll see y'all next time.